Welcome back to Concepts of Programming. In today's video, we're going to finish up our third project, Super Pong. So in our last video, we accomplished making our home screen, making the easy mode, and in this video, we're going to finish up the home screen and create the hard mode. So as usual, the first thing we're going to need to do is look at some of the blocks needed. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a demonstration sprite. You guys don't need to do this because this is just for learning purposes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the cat and I'm going to code. So the first thing we're going to look at is in the operator section. In our last video, we covered the OR operator, which basically looks at two different operator conditions and says if either one of them is true, then run the code inside. Today, we're going to look at not. So to demonstrate, I'm going to use a forever loop and then use an if statement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put not inside here, and I'm going to say move 10 steps. So typically, if I don't have a not, what it's going to do is say I have touching mouse pointer. So if touching mouse pointer, then move 10 steps. So what happens when I click this code is that once my mouse touches it, it's going to move 10 steps. But by adding a not, what it says is if not touching mouse pointer, move 10 steps. So as long as the cat, the sprite, is not touching my mouse, it's going to move 10 steps. And to make sure that this is visible, I'm going to add a wait 1 second. Now, when I click on this code, it's going to move 10 steps and wait 1 second, and it's going to keep doing that until my mouse pointer is on top of it. Since it's touching the mouse pointer right now, then it's not going to execute the code. But once I take my mouse pointer off, it's going to move 10 steps and wait 1 second. So now we have a basic idea of two of the three of these operators. Now the next section we're going to look at is going to be numerical operators. If you'll notice in Scratch, we have slight variations of groups, but the way they're grouped is basically on how or what they use. So the first operators we have are all math. They say addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Then the next one we have is pick random, which we did cover in our last video. And then we have these three, which I'm going to get back to. But near the bottom, we have other categories, including these. So with these three, what they do is they basically work the same way they do in math. We have greater than, we have less than, and we have equal to. And a great way to demonstrate this is going to be using an if statement. So if I take this out of the forever loop, and I say 60 here, what it's going to do is it's going to say if this statement is true, if 60 is greater than 50, then it's going to run this code. So if I click on this if statement, it's going to move 10 steps and then wait 1 second. And this is because the statement 60 is greater than 50 is true. And as long as it's true, it's going to run the code inside. But if I were to say put down 40 and then click on it, nothing's going to happen because 40 is not greater than 50, and therefore this is false, and since this statement isn't true, this isn't going to run. So with if statements, as long as this statement is true, it's going to run the code inside. And in this case, since 40 is smaller than 50, this is false, and it's not going to run. If I wanted to get a case where I had 40 and 50, and it was true, I'd say if 40 is less than 50, then move 10 steps and then wait 1 second. When I click on this, it's going to move 10 steps and wait on 1 second because 40 is less than 50. The final one of these we have is equal to. So if I put 60 and I clicked on this, 60 is not equal to 50, which is why it's not going to run. Again, if I put 50, it's going to run because 50 is equal to 50. So the basis of how these work is I put in two numbers or two values, and then I see if they're greater, less than, or equal to each other. The final thing we're going to look at, the project itself. So I'm going to get rid of this cat, even though it was nice to play with it, and I'm going to start finishing the actual Super Pong game. Now the first thing we're going to do is with our home screen, we just have two buttons and the floor, then the score. That's not exactly what's ideal to look at. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a home screen name. And this is going to be pretty simple. It's just going to be the title of the game. So using the text tool, I'm going to add the word Super, and then Pong. So the title of my game is Super Pong, but you can really name it anything you want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the font to Pixel, change the fill to black. Again, you can change these to whatever you want. I'm going to change the size to a bit bigger because this is the name of the game. I want it to be big, I want it to show. And then I'm going to align the crosses, and then I'm going to move it somewhere near the middle. So with this, since it's on the home screen, the code is pretty simple. I'm going to have when green flag clicked, I'm going to show, because as soon as the green flag is clicked, I want my home screen to show, which is going to be the buttons, the floor, and then the title. And we're going to add a little bit more afterwards. And then just like with our 2 balls, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when I receive next page, because remember easy mode runs with easy mode button, hard mode runs with the hard mode button, but the next page runs with when either of them are clicked. I'm going to say hide. And the basic idea of this is as soon as either one of these are clicked, I'm going to make this disappear. And that's pretty much all I have to code for the title number. The next thing we're going to look at is going to be creating ball sprites. So the balls we have here are going to be for the easy mode, and technically I could also use them for hard mode, but I'm going to be creating a new sprite for the purpose of this game. So I'm going to go to choose a sprite again. I'm going to scroll a little bit until I find the ball, and then once it appears, I'm able to code it. So the other thing we're going to add is, since with easy mode we only had 1 paddle, 2 balls, the idea of hard mode is I'm going to have 2 paddles, 2 balls. So it's going to be a multiplayer game. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a sprite, I'm going to go to paint. Well, last time we kind of used this thinner paddle. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a paddle standing up vertically. So when I have this, I'm going to change the size of it a bit, make it a bit smaller because I don't want it to cover the entire screen. That would be too easy. I'm going to align the crosses. And I've got my first paddle. Now, since this is a multiplayer game, I want it to be as fair as possible, meaning both paddles should be as similar as possible. First, I'm going to rename this to Paddle 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate it. I'm going to duplicate it because I want the paddle sizes to be exactly the same, otherwise it's not as fair. The other thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to hide everything. So with the basics of creating this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when green flag clicked, hide. And I'm going to do the same thing for the second paddle. And I'm going to do the same thing for the ball. And the reason we're going to do this is, again, because on our home screen, we don't want these to show up. So the way I duplicate within other sprites is what I can do is I can actually just drag this over and into the ball or into the sprite. So when I drag and I release, it's going to keep the code here. So the code is still going to be in paddle 2. But when I go to the ball, this code is going to be copied over. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to finish coding the first or the left paddle. So just like with easy mode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when I receive, but since this is going to be in the hard mode, I'm going to say when I receive hard mode. So I'm going to reset this and it's going to disappear. The first thing I need to do is make them show because you can't play with invisible paddles. So I'm going to add show. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have it go towards the middle of the screen. So right now I'm going to show it real quick. What I want it to do is I want it to be decently close to the edge. For this project, we do want a bit of white space or like a good section of white space, but I do want it to be near the edge. And then I'm going to set my Y to 0 because that's going to put it in the direct middle of the screen. So I'm going to have it go to X. For the X, it can be somewhere around here, and then Y 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to duplicate this for my second paddle. Except for my second paddle, notice that, by the way, when you duplicate, the code kind of goes everywhere, so you do have to kind of look around. When I drag this up, I'm going to change it to positive 219. And the point of this is just to make sure, again, since this is a 2-player game, I'm going to hide this. since this is a two-player game, you do want them to be fair. You want them to start at the same spot. So when I click hard mode, this is going to be directly here, 0, negative 219. And on its exact opposite, it's going to be positive 219 because, again, moving to the right is positive for x. And it's also going to have a y at 0. That way you start at pretty much the same space. The next thing I'm going to do is just going to be movement. So for these two paddles, since I don't really want them overlapping or going left and right, I'm going to have them only go up and down. And the keys I'm going to work this with are going to be W and S. So with W, this is going to be for the left paddle, by the way. I'm going to say if key W pressed, change Y by 10. So obviously you can use any keys you want for both paddles as long as they're different paddles, meaning hopefully the left paddle keys are on the left side and then the right paddle keys are on the right side. But I'm going to use the standard W and S, and up arrow key and down arrow key. So for the left paddle, I'm going to have if key W pressed, then change Y by 10. And then I'm going to say if key S pressed, change Y by negative 10. So what this is going to do is it's basically going to allow my paddle to move up and down. So when I click hard mode, when I move the keys W and S, the paddle is going to move up and down. For my second paddle, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually copy and paste this code. So I'm going to drag this over to deselect it, and I'm going to drag it in here, release, put this back, or of course you could manually grab the blocks, but it's going to have the same thing, except I'm going to go if key up arrow and if key down arrow. And the purpose of this is because I don't want the same keys to be controlling both controllers. Otherwise, that wouldn't really work for the game. So I'm going to have if key up arrow pressed, change Y by 10, and if key down arrow pressed, change Y by negative 10. So now when I click the green flag and I click hard mode, when I use the up and down arrows, the right paddle is going to move. And then when I use the W and S, the left paddle is going to move. And this way we can have two players sitting next to each other, both playing the game. Now the next thing we're going to do is, obviously because this is a two-player game, we can't just have one score variable. We're going to create a second score variable for the second player. And I'm just going to call it score2. So I can move score2 to anywhere I want. I'm going to leave it up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use score2 to keep track of the second player and not the first. So when we select hard mode, score is going to refer to the left player or the first player, and then score2 is going to be for the right player or the second player. Obviously, when I use easy mode, score2 isn't going to mean anything. So what I can actually do with that is when I create score, I can leave it there and it's just not going to do anything. So I'm going to start programming the ball now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say when I receive hard mode, I'm going to show, because obviously you do need to see the ball for when you're coding and when you're playing. And then just like with our easy mode, we are going to need at least one of the sprites to reset the entire score. So what I'm going to do is, since for hard mode, I'm going to need to reset both score and score2, I'm going to set score to 0. And then I'm going to set score2 to 0. Then I'm going to have my ball go to x0, y0. And this is just so my ball starts at the middle of the screen because, again, fairness. So since my ball hasn't coded any movement yet, it's just going to stay in the exact middle of the screen. Now, one thing I'm going to mention is, since this is hard mode and not easy mode, I'm actually going to change the ball size to something smaller. I'm going to change it to 50 instead of 100. This isn't going to change that many things, but what it's going to do is, since the ball is smaller, it'll make it look like it's moving a lot faster, which is going to be useful. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set its direction. So with our easy mode, since the paddle was on the bottom, I set my arrow to somewhere around the bottom. But if I do this with this code, what it's actually going to do is I'm going to add my forever loop, and then I'm going to have it move 10 steps, and if on edge bounce, because those are the standards that we covered last time. So when I click the hard mode, it's going to move, but it's not exactly going to hit the paddles. And what I want to do is I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So I'm going to actually point it somewhere near the left. Now obviously this is going to be a little bit biased for the left or first player, but don't worry, because since there are 2 balls in this game, the other one can start pointing out toward the right. That way, since again this is the hard mode, both of the players have to start by trying to catch a ball. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure when I click the green flag right now, it's just going to go straight through the paddles, because there is nothing that's going to happen. I haven't coded any of the score. So inside of our forever loop, I'm going to say if touching paddle 1, then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change score by 1, because score is going to refer to the left, and paddle 1. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same block of point in direction random. So I'm going to point in direction, pick random, -80 to 80. And then for this program, I'm actually going to add something a little bit different. I'm going to add the repeat until. And the reason is because when I click the green flag and I click hard mode, once it hits the paddle, sometimes because this is random, what it's going to do is it's going to add a bunch to the score, because if it hits the paddle at multiple different points, it's going to keep adding to the score. So even though my paddle and my ball only actually touched around 3 times, my score is 8. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to use repeat until. And the way repeat until works is it's going to repeat until this action is true. And the way repeat until works is it's going to repeat until this action is true. And what we're going to do is we're going to use an operator, or the not. So that what we're saying is that we're going to repeat until we are not touching paddle 2. So this is a little bit complicated. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to repeat until touching paddle 1. And what this is going to do is if I were to run this right now, and I add my move 10 steps, until it is touching paddle 1, I'm going to keep moving 10 steps. But since I'm already touching paddle 1, I'm going to add a not. And what this is going to do is it's going to repeat until it's not touching paddle 2. So it's as long as it's touching paddle 2, it's going to move 10 steps. And when I click the green flag now, it's only going to increase the score by 1, or in this case 2, because it actually bounced off into the bottom. So it's going to increase by 1. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make it for paddle 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do pretty much the exact same code with one main difference. Actually, 3 main differences. So I'm going to keep this in the forever loop, and I'm going to say if touching paddle 2, I'm going to make sure that this isn't score. I'm going to change score 2 by 1, because when it touches the right paddle or the second paddle, the second score is going to increase instead of the first, because the second player needs to increase its score. I'm going to point in direction, random, so this is the same block. And then I'm going to do the same thing of repeat until, except I'm going to use repeat until not touching paddle 2. So what this is going to do is it's basically going to say, as long as I'm not touching paddle 2, I need to move 10 steps. So now when I click the hard mode, what it's going to do is it's going to keep moving around. And then once it touches paddle 2, it's going to increase the score by 1. So now our ball code is working, and we're almost done with the game. But what we need to do is, first off, we're going to need to duplicate the ball. And this is because this is hard mode. We need multiple balls. So I'm going to change this to a blue color, but you can change it to any other color. And the code is pretty much going to be exactly the same. I don't really need to change anything except for the direction. And again, this is because when I click the green flag and I click hard mode, it's going to look like they're the same ball at first. So what I'm going to do is, since I have two balls, I'm going to have my orange yellow ball point toward player 1, but I'm going to have my blue ball point towards player 2. And this way, right off the bat, both players have to focus and try and play. And then they're just going to move around and the score is going to continually increase. But obviously, we're going to make this just a bit harder. What we're going to do is we are going to add 2 goals. And what the goals are going to do are they're going to be basically walls on the left and right side. So we're going to choose a sprite, go to paint, use the rectangle tool again, and I'm going to select a pretty thin, tall rectangle. So what I'm going to do is, while I have this, the first thing I need to make sure is that the X and the X are aligned. And then I'm going to drag it over to near the edge. And this is because I want, when the hard mode is played, I want it to be the edge, and I also don't want it to touch my paddle. So there'll be a little bit of space in between the paddle and the wall. Now here's the thing, the space needs to be smaller than the gap between the ball, or smaller than the ball size. That way the ball can't just hit the edge or go through and under. And then what it's going to do is it's going to be a wall. And since I have one for the left side, I do need one for the right side. And now for the code for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when green flag clicked, I'm going to go to X, Y, my current location. And then instead of just kind of taking this and doing the same thing for the right, which I need to name right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it by dragging it in. And the only thing I need to change is change this to positive. So now when I click the green flag and I click hard, these are going to be at the exact opposite sides. Now right now my code has them stay during the home screen. If you want to change that, you can do the same thing we did with the paddles or any other sprite and have it when green flag clicked hide, and then when I receive hard mode show. But for now, I'm going to leave them in when we start the game. Now the reason they're there is because I need to make this game a bit harder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say when I receive hard mode, I'm going to add a forever loop, and I'm going to say if, and then I'm going to use or, and I'm just going to say if I'm touching either the ball 3, now make sure that you name your balls or understand which balls are which, because these balls are going to be for the easy mode, so they won't apply at all to these. And these balls are going to be for hard mode, so they won't apply at all to, say, the floor. I'm going to change this to if touching ball 3 or touching ball 4, then set score 2 to 0. And this is just going to reset. Now, with this part, you need to be very careful. Right now, I'm coding inside of my right, which is why score 2 is 0. But when I code inside my left, I need to, if I were to copy this, which I am, I need to look for this, and then I need to set score 1 to 0. And this is just because when I hit, or when one of the balls hit the left side, score 1 is set to 0, and then when I hit the right side, score 2 is set to 0. Now when I click the green flag, and I click hard mode, once it hits one of the backboards, it's going to reset the score. The final thing we're going to be adding is the game over sprite. And the game over sprite is actually going to apply for both the easy and the hard mode. So what it's going to say is I'm going to add text, and it's just going to say game over. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size again, and then I'm going to align the crosses. And then I'm going to drag it over to around the middle of the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, when green flag clicked, I'm going to first hide it, because obviously I don't want a huge game over sign in the middle of the game. And I'm going to say forever if either of my scores becomes 15, so I can do this with or, if either score is equal to 15 or score 2 is equal to 15, we're going to use the equal sign. And the reason we're doing this, by the way, is because for either the easy or hard mode, it's going to reset and end the game. By the way, you can change it to any number you want. I'm going to change it and end it at 15. So if either of them become 15, I'm going to show. And then I'm going to stop all. And what this is going to do is this is going to give an actual end to the game. Now when I click the green flag, when I click easy mode and I have my balls working, notice that score 2 isn't going to change because score 2 isn't in this game. And then what it's going to do is I'm going to play for a little bit, and then once the balls come down, of course, once it reaches 15, it's going to display the game over. And then the same will go for the hard mode. So now we've pretty much finished our entire game, and part 2 of Super Pong is finished.